Welcome in to the JP and Hack Show, part of the Field of 12 Media Network. This is Season 1, Episode 3. This show is presented by our partners at Bet Rivers Sportsbook. I am Joshua Perry, of course, joined by my co-host, Christian Hackenberg. And boy, I'm telling you, that week 1 of football, I mean, they got us started off right, man.
It was a good one. And I want to apologize up front. I'm feeling like my boy JP right now. Traveling, wheels up. I'm in Chicago in a hotel room trying to figure this out. So I want to apologize first off, but I am excited to talk about it. I thought it was really, really good performances all around in the Big Ten. Some really good marquee matchups coming up for week 2. So pumped about it, bro.
It's part of the lifestyle between me and you, just, all over the place. We're men of leisure worldwide, just, traveling, talking sports, talking lifestyle. It doesn't even matter. So people will get used to it, but let's dive right on into it. Like you said, week 1, I thought it was really good. Ton of action. Just to kind of recap going through the Big Ten, we started off with the Thursday night. OSU 45, Minnesota 31. Michigan State on Friday night against Northwestern. Michigan State won that 38-21. And then we got to Saturday, the big noon game for Fox, Penn State versus Wisconsin. Penn State won that 16-10. And then we had Rutgers playing Temple, 61-14 for Rutgers. Is the first time they've scored 61 points in a long-ass time.
Yeah.
And then we had Michigan playing Western Michigan. That was a 47-14. Started off a little bit close, but Michigan blew that wide open. I'm kind of excited about that team moving forward. Nebraska had their bounce back against Fordham, 52-7. Iowa 34, Indiana 6. That was a big one we're going to dive into and dissect because I was totally surprised. I don't know about you, Hack. Yeah, that was kind of wild there.
Yeah.
We had Maryland against West Virginia.
I'm just wondering what, like, out of all those that you've just listed so far, like, which is that Iowa Indiana game your biggest surprise of the week?
Yeah, I think that one was shocking. The Penn State Wisconsin one, I think, was maybe the most enlightening game of the week, though, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like I learned a ton watching that one.
Yeah.
We had Maryland in a rivalry against West Virginia, 30-24. Purdue 30, Oregon State 21, and then finally the upset of the week, I guess, you had Illinois losing to Texas San Antonio 37-30. I was not expecting that. But diving into that Thursday night game, week 1, you could say, was kicked off right.
Yeah.
Ohio State, again, 45, Minnesota 31. It was a shaky start for Ohio State. Stroud was 8-14 with 0 touchdowns and interception in the first half. Ohio State's defense kind of looked like the Ohio State defense of last year, gave up some yards on the ground, but also had some struggles in the pass game with the ball going over their head, which we've seen a little bit. But you flip it to the second half, and Stroud went 5 of 8 for 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, which is, kind of what we expect now out of Ohio State offenses. Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson were both big in the run game. It was Mayan Williams, Travion Henderson that were big at running back, nearly 500 total yards of offense for the Buckeyes. But you got to give Minnesota a lot of credit in that game. 408 yards of offense. Tanner Morgan threw for 205 and a touchdown. Mo Ibrahim was literally killing Ohio State before he left the game, 163 rushing yards, and he was injured in the third quarter. So that could have easily been a 200-yard rushing game for him. And then they held C.J. Stroud to 58 passing yards before OSU's third quarter explosion for 21 points. Big takeaways from that game, Hat.
Yeah, I think we were spot on with Minnesota coming into that game and how they managed their game plan. Just talking about controlling the clock, running the football, dominating the line of scrimmage, and not letting Ohio State offensively really get in a rhythm. And especially with a young quarterback, I thought that was big. And that was something that allowed them to stay in it. And really, I mean, they led at halftime. Am I correct? So, like, really, really, put a really strong showing in that first half. I think defensively, Minnesota, I didn't think they tackled great. I think they gave up a few bonehead plays that ended up being explosive plays.
Yep.
Busted coverages. And ultimately, when you play a team like Ohio State, you can't have those mistakes. You can't have those things happen. Even if it's a young team, even if they have a young quarterback, the talent on that roster, top to bottom, is going to make you pay for those things. So just looking at it, I was thoroughly impressed with how Ohio State responded in a hostile environment for the youth on that team, especially at quarterback. I thought Stroud settled in, made some throws in the second half. I thought he looked a little shaky early, but we've all been there. We know what that's like. The pressure, starting your first game, you definitely have some jitters. So I think by no means does this put Minnesota out of anything. The Mo Ibrahim injury, I think, is going to be a concern, but I thought that they still were able to run the football. And I think that offensive line moving forward, they're going to, but just personally, that sucks for Mo. I thought I really like that kid. I love the way he runs. Yeah. I think he can be a special guy. So I'm wishing a speedy recovery for him on a more sentimental note. But that was kind of my analysis of it. And I'm curious to see you dive in a little bit because I know you're going to.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Before the game, we pretty much predicted what this, at least the ebb and flow of the game was going to feel like. You know, it's a young quarterback on the road Thursday night, ended up being some weather. So the offense wasn't going to be perfect early on. And Ohio State defensively was going to have their struggles. And on the flip side of that, we both had a lot of respect for this Minnesota team coming in, probably more so than some of the talking heads nationally. And so this wasn't just going to be a cakewalk for the Buckeyes. You knew this Minnesota team was going to fight, and that's exactly what we saw. I 100% agree with you. When you evaluate Minnesota, there were too many coverage busts for a team that was going to already be at a disadvantage just in terms of the athletes that they had to face. I agree with you on that 100%. When you're playing a team that is more talented, has more speed, whatever the case is in you cannot afford to hurt yourself with mistakes like that. And Minnesota is always going to be a pretty well-coached team that's not going to have a ton of penalties. And so it's going to come down to the mental aspect just in terms of how they play football to solve that. So I thought that was really good analysis there. And I will go out on saying this about this Minnesota team. Losing Mo definitely hurts, like you said. They feel like they've got running backs, though. Just in terms of depth. And the hard thing about those guys is they haven't had a ton of reps because Mo was the guy getting all the carries. But PJ feels like it's a very talented room. And you mentioned that big physical offensive line. I personally, just as I look at what the Big Ten West is going to be this year, would not be surprised if this is a rematch in the Big Ten championship game. I have that much respect for this Minnesota team. And you almost feel like this is a team that's going to rally after losing kind of their heartbeat of their offense. You know, that's just kind of what PJ's teams do. So this will be really unique. And then we're going to kind of dive into, in the last segment, the big games of the week. But I think for Ohio State, there's I think a lot to build off of, but I also think there are some things that make you nervous because as I watched the back end of Ohio State's defense, I think I saw more of the same issues that popped up from a year ago, where when the ball is in the air, I'm not exactly sure that they're great at defending it. And you mentioned how you thought Minnesota missed a lot of tackles. I tend to agree with that. Ohio State was poor tackling as well, especially in the first half of the game. I mean, you know, Mo is a tough running back, but he was constantly falling forward. He was constantly running through arm tackles. And it really wasn't until the second half that I saw Ohio State finally finish a tackle, knocking a guy backwards. And that's, I mean, it can't take you a half to get started there. So be really curious, but this was, I think, the game that we wanted to see. I thought it was super exciting, and it just kicked everything off right on a Thursday night. Yeah, for sure. I think for Ohio State, it's a good win to get under their belt. And I haven't really paid as much. I paid attention to defenses, but I haven't paid attention just to defensive execution as a player because I'm worried about looking at what guys can do, who I can take advantage of, tendencies, things of that nature. And I feel like for Ohio State, having played that physical of a game early is going to pay big dividends for them throughout the season. For sure.
Just from even a tackling standpoint. Just it's one of those things where it's hard to explain unless you've played it. But I think just feeling it, getting that out of the way, and now having the opportunity to go into a schedule where after this week, you're going to have some opportunity to start building some steam and some momentum with some lesser opponents and gain some more confidence.
Hack, I think that's a really good point, though. Just in terms of the feeling it aspect, because of the way that training camps are done right now. Like, nobody's really that physical during camp. And part of it's because of the rules, but the other part of it is everybody's got these genius sports science guys on their staff that tell you about load management and everything else.
Yeah.
And so I think it was kind of an epidemic across college football that nobody knew how to tackle in week one. And I think that's just a part of the way that the game is going to be. I think it's going to take people a little time to ramp up. I'm not a fan of it. I think the only way to learn how to tackle is to tackle, but I also don't think it is necessarily a hard skill to develop because you can do it in ways that you don't have to have big collisions. And I also think that a lot of tackling issues are solved if guys run to the ball and finish during practice, which I think is also an epidemic in college football, where guys are too cool to finish at the ball. Neither here nor there. It's me being an old guy. Get off my lawn. But it'll be curious to see. But I think that's a really good point. Like, guys are gonna have to feel their way through this for a little bit.
Yeah. Before we move on to the next segment, let me tell you guys a little bit about our partners at BetRivers Sportsbooks. If you haven't signed up with BetRivers yet, now's the time, because they're offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. But what sets them apart is that they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, more secure, and more reliable. We all love that. With football season kicking off, get in the action by going to betrivers.com today or by downloading the BetRivers iOS app. Must be 21 years or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
All right, let's move on ahead to your guys. This was the Fox Big Noon game. This was a hell of a game. Penn State 16, Wisconsin 10. You talk about a classic Big Ten battle, like scoreless through the first half. It was rock'em sock'em, offense, physical, defense clapping back. Lack of explosion from either team. Like, this is, throwback football that we were watching coming up. But for Penn State, I thought overall that Cliff played well in the second half. He was 11 for 19 for 205 for the game. Big TD to Jahan Dotson. There were a couple of explosives to him. I thought the Penn State run defense was exactly what you said it would be, Hack, where those guys were smaller bodies up front, built to be athletic, gave up $180 on the ground with 8 runs of 10 plus, but they bowed up when they needed to get some plays. And I think because of how stingy their scoring defense was, they actually did force Wisconsin to abandon that run game late, which worked out for them. On the flip side of that game, I thought Wisconsin played really, really well defensively. Penn State only had 297 total yards, and they only gave up about 50 rushing yards, which, I mean, anytime you can do that in a game, you got a hell of a chance to win. The tough part, though, and when we talk about complementary football, which we'll dive into here in a little bit, is they did not force a turnover. And they were abysmal offensively, and so that definitely hurt them. They moved the ball well for 365 yards. They possessed the ball for about 43 minutes in the game, but they turned it over 3 times, twice in the fourth quarter. And, they had some red zone issues, which is bad. They couldn't push the ball down the field, which I'll talk about here in a sec. So my question to you initially is, where does Wisconsin go from here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's their issue. What I noticed from Penn State specifically early on towards their defense is that the way they are built is once they got Wisconsin behind the sticks and off schedule offensively and forced them into situations, that's where the athletic front then created pass rush and the back end held up on their end. And that's one of the things that we talked about. And Graham did not execute the way that you would expect Graham Mertz to execute, especially coming off of last year and all the expectation heading into the season. So for me, with their team, what it seems like they have outside it goes back to what I thought they were going to build a big play action game coming into this. I think that's how they have to do things in order to create explosive plays offensively and give them opportunities to put points on the board while also possessing the football. And I thought that they had opportunities to do that throughout the game because they did possess the ball for 47 minutes. And for the vast majority of those drives, they did move the football down the field. They did stay on schedule. They were in what you call shot opportunity type down and distances, 2nd and 4, 2nd and 5s. Those opportunities, I don't think they took full advantage of offensively from a game plan standpoint. Yeah. And I think that that's kind of one of the things that hurt them, where they may have been able to do that and create explosives. So for Wisconsin, I think it's going to be a unique battle because in the West there with Minnesota, like we were talking about, I think the two teams are very similar offensively, but I think Minnesota and Tanner Morgan have a little bit more of an explosive passing game element involved. And I think that's, to me, I don't want to count Iowa out yet, but I'm not 1,000% sold on that because we'll get into that later.
We will get into that because I think I'm right there with you.
Yeah, we'll get into that later. And the same thing with Northwestern. I mean, I thought they played well offensively, but defensively they didn't do what I was expecting them to do from a Pat Fitzgerald Wildcat defense. So, to me, I think Wisconsin and Minnesota are going to be the two teams to watch in the West. And I think for them, like I said, I think they just need to get in a rhythm offensively and figure out a way how to create those explosives, because they didn't against the team that you need to beat in order to be where Wisconsin wants to be. Yep. They weren't able to separate outside and create explosives, but they were able to pound the football, and that's part of it. Now you have to figure out how can we blend that together and mesh that together and weave those two things together to create scoring opportunities.
Yeah. So here's the thing on Wisconsin for me. I agree with just about everything you said. If you're going to be a team that is a grind the clock, pound the ball football team, then you cannot turn the ball over 3 times. You can't do it. And especially in the fourth quarter, you literally can't give the ball away. The teams that can give the football away are the teams that can also score in a 1 minute and 41 second drive off of 3 plays. Like they can be super explosive and they can get a chunk of yardage and they can score at will just from being explosive. But when you're a team like Penn State, like Wisconsin, that can't get more than 23 yards on a single play in a game, which this is the stat of the game for me. This is the one that blew my mind. And this is where I said they got some real issues. 95 plays of offense, and their longest play from scrimmage was 23 yards. They had the ball for 40 plus minutes in the game.
Yep.
And you can't come up with more than 10 points. It's a problem.
Yep.
And so you can't be the team that turns the football over if that's what your offense is going to look like. You can grind them out. You can be rock'em sock'em. You can lack explosion. But when you get in that red zone, you have to take care of the ball. You have to punch it in. They had red zone turnovers, which really hurt. And they had penalties in the red zone as well. At that point in the field, you can't back yourself up because you can't get those yards back. And they proved that. And that's where I was getting on the defense, the comment that I made about them not forcing a turnover. If your offense is going to be the one that is going to lack explosion, then as a defense, you have to get the momentum swinging play. You have to get the play that gets some momentum back for your offense. And maybe when they do have that opportunity to take a shot after a turnover, they're able to capitalize because you got the mo on your side. You have to be the defense that takes the ball away in a position to where your offense is right there on the 30-yard line going in, and they don't have to get all of the yards and they don't have to build the drive. You have to have the defense that gets the pick six or they get the scoop and score. So your offense doesn't even have to touch the ball to score points when your offense looks away that they did on Saturday. And so that's the next step for them, because I thought they were really good. I think they're going to be a great defense. I love what Jimmy Leonard does as a coordinator. But the fact of the matter there is, if your offense isn't going to do it, you have to take matters into your own hands as a defense. And I'm a personal believer that you can coach taking the football away. You can coach a mentality of being disruptive of the football, and that's something that they can build into as they move forward in the season.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just even scheme wise, I think they were typical Wisconsin, bend, don't break, play sound, be gap sound. It'd be interesting to see if they start bringing in some more creative, exotic type blitz looks, things that can confuse a quarterback and create turnovers through confusion. And it doesn't even have to be turnovers. I mean, I think it could just be like I said, a 10, 15-yard sack, a quarterback hangs onto the ball, and then you have relentless pursuit. And there's all kinds of things that I think can change momentum from a defensive standpoint. So I think that'd be interesting to see where Wisconsin goes from that moving forward. But I was surprised by Penn State too. I mean, the offense kind of had a lack of continuity, I think. And I want to give Yurcich a bunch of credit there for the second half adjustments and putting those guys in situations to get explosives. I think for Clifford, I thought it was a good game, not a great game. I think that they need to continue to grow if they want to be a big player in the East in terms of somebody who could take down Ohio State.
What was good, not great?
Stands,
from the quarterback's eyes, what do you see?
From my standpoint, I think he had an opportunity. He missed Dotson on a post that was naked down the middle. And it's one of those things where if you're playing a Wisconsin and the way that Wisconsin's playing offensively, like that's okay. You can miss that and you guys can still recover. But when you're playing a team like Ohio State, who's going to have the gas on the pedal offensively and be able to go and you have to show the ability to win a shootout, because I don't think that Wisconsin's defense is that much better than Ohio State's. And I think Ohio State's going to have the opportunity to create more turnovers than Wisconsin, just because of the athletes they have and the matchups they can create too, just playing base sound defense. So for me, with Clifford, I'm excited to see the progression. I think the schedule plays into it, heading into that stretch towards the end of the year where they are going to play the Ohio State and Michigan, which we'll get to as well. I was very surprised. And being able to not miss those opportunities when they get handed to you on silver platters, especially from a guy who's played so much football. I understand misses happen, but like I said, in the grander scale, looking at it, the execution, getting in a rhythm and figuring all that stuff out, I think that's where they have to go. And I think defensively, they made a big statement, and I think that they're ready. I think that they're ready to make some noise from that side of the football.
Yep, I agree wholeheartedly. That's going to be a defense that is. You saw it. They gave up some yards, but they were flying around to the ball. I think they came up with plays exactly when they needed to. They were able to block a kick, which is phenomenal. Anytime you can do that, that is a game-changing play. And I love what they have in the back end. And it's not like they were going against some, really, really good athletes against Wisconsin's skill, but just in the secondary, you can tell that they're long, rangy guys. They know how to run. They've got a mentality for, disrupting the football when it's in the air, trying to take it away, pass breakups, those types of things. So I think in being in a game like this, it's where you like to have a defense of guys that can really run around and late in the game, they can continue to make plays. I mean, they played 95 snaps on that side of the ball, and they were still strong at the end of the game. And to your point, I think the build offensively, first off, I thought for Penn State, the run game was way, way worse than I expected it to be. I thought it was going to be a more dominant ground game. And from that standpoint, I think that's where a lot of the pressure on Clifford came is, from your being a quarterback, when your run game isn't threatening, defenses play you a little bit differently. And for that
that's a great point.
You want the least on your plate as possible. Not to say that he's not a good quarterback, but again, it's a new offense. You're trying to get him in rhythm. You're playing a good team. Like, you don't want all that on his plate. And so from that standpoint, I think he handled it well, knowing that he
Yes.
was going to be the guy. It was going to be on his arm. But like you said earlier, you want to see him continue to take those steps into becoming the guy who can lead you to a victory against who we feel like are the real top contenders right now.
Yeah, by no means am I bashing him. I'm just going to be higher on him than most guys, just because I've been there and I have a little bit of skin in the game. And I think I really want him to be successful. And I think that's where I bring up those points.
For sure. And I think they're all valid points that you bring up.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm looking forward to it. I think they got a cakewalk this week. I think it's an opportunity for them to really get in rhythm and be amped up and prepared and geared up and for
who do they
for
have, like Idaho?
Yeah, they got something. They got a smaller school this week, and then at home, and then they have Auburn, which is going to be the whiteout. It's going to be prime time.
That's going to be big.
SEC's coming to town, so that's where I think you're gonna see an opportunity for them to show the ability to make some adjustments, run the football, create some ebb and flow, take some pressure off Cliff, and him be able to get in rhythm with Dotson and take advantage of those explosives when they come.
For sure. Let's move it along to this one, because I know we both got really interesting thoughts here. Iowa 34, Indiana 6. I'm not going to dive into the stats on this one. I think that game is pretty self-explanatory. We'll say that Indiana threw 3 interceptions and 2 of them went for 6. They went down 14 early in the game after a pick 6 and a big run. Pass game offensively for Indiana was abysmal. The run game absolutely did not exist. When you look at Iowa, obviously defensively, they just forced the turnovers. And that was pretty much the name of the game. Give me your thoughts just overall. You could take it either direction on what you saw from that one.
Yeah, I was very surprised at Indiana, just the way they showed up. I think it was uncharacteristic for Penix to play the way that he played based upon what we saw last year in his body of work. Those things happen, but it was just really surprising, and I'm curious to see how they react. And I think this isn't a complete go and buy Iowa either. To your point, I think the fact that you can score 14 points defensively is huge, and offensively, the same inconsistencies I think showed up that we were talking about during our preview last week.
Yep.
So for both teams, I think there's a lot of work to do following this up. But I think ultimately it's just unfortunate for Indiana. The way they played, and also the fact that Adidas couldn't get them some jerseys that spelled Indiana.
That were spelled correctly. So, that's
it's
a rough deal there, buddy. So I got a story on that. I can't remember what game it was, but Braxton Miller was coming out of the locker room, and the back of his jersey said B. Miler, Miler, instead of Miller. And our equipment guys were able to get him adjusted and fixed before game time. So those types of things happen. Yeah. It should not happen, but it is what it is there.
Yeah.
So for this one, it was really interesting to me because I was shocked, and I tweeted it during the game. Like, I was literally shocked, and I wasn't shocked that Indiana could lose the game. Like, that was totally within the realm of possibility. I was shocked that they looked as bad as they did on offense specifically. Penix, I don't know if he's right, and I hate to speculate like that. I really do. But you're talking about a guy who's coming off of injury, and just he never looked like the quarterback that we really got to see last year. Yeah. And they pulled him out of the game. And part of that, I think, was because the game was out of hand, and they wanted to make sure they could protect his health and everything. But part of that really could be from the fact that he just wasn't right, and they didn't want to have him in harm's way physically or mentally. But it was disappointing. They literally couldn't run the ball. They couldn't throw the ball. So obviously there was no offense. Personally, I thought defensively, Indiana, if you take out the one big run that they gave up early, which was an uncharacteristic fundamental issue by a guy who's supposed to set the edge, jumping inside and letting it spill down the sideline. There's nobody out there, which they don't typically do. But you take that play out of there, and Indiana's defense was really good again. They forced a couple of turnovers. They limited Iowa to 303 total yards, and 56 came off of one play. And that's where me and you were on the same page, where Iowa now has jumped into the top 10 in the rankings, and they've got this big matchup coming against Iowa State, which we're going to talk about, which might not be the game that everybody wants it to be on either side, but neither here nor there right now. Iowa, to me, their performance was phenomenal, and nobody should take that away from them, because there were some teams in week one that did not perform. But I don't think that we can count on 14 points defensively week in and week out. And this Iowa offense has issues. Outside of their big run play, I don't think they necessarily ran the ball dominantly. And Spencer Petras is an average quarterback. Not going to necessarily make you a ton of mistakes. I don't know if he's going to create a ton off of his arm. They've got Tyrone Tracy in the pass game, who I think is a really good receiver, but he's their only guy who's going to stretch you. They've got Sam Laporta, who's a great tight end, but he's not going to stretch you. So I don't know if this is a team offensively that can compete with other teams in the top 10.
Yeah, and you can take those guys away fairly easily defensively. You cloud that side, we had this especially without a dominating run game. You can put some guys from a back end standpoint dedicated to a guy that can stretch it and really take him out of it. And you're forcing someone else to win it. And
we had this call defensively. It was one double and then whatever the number was. So it'd be like one double three. And so basically we're playing cover one, but the safety is double teaming number three with whoever would be on that guy in coverage. And so it's bracket. People are familiar with this. And that's a simple deal right there, because when you're playing single coverage, you're strong in the run game. So you can make sure that you have the box count together, and it's one back, one gap, and guys can be aggressive in the run game, especially at linebacker, because your coverage is typically going to be in the backfield anyway. And then on the back end, those guys can have their eyes on their man. You can get the resources you need over there. And if I'm playing Iowa, what risk is there for me in calling a bracket coverage like that, where I feel like, their guys aren't, you never want to expose yourself. And so teams, they don't necessarily like playing man-to-man on a team like Ohio State, because they feel like they can become exposed. You feel comfortable putting guys on an island when you're playing Iowa. So we'll see. But I feel like there's a very simple formula to limiting those guys offensively.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Let me get your thoughts quickly on Michigan.
Yeah, I thought that was a great showing. I thought McNamara played well. I think that was the rhythm and the ability to put up points that you were looking for. I understand. It was Western Michigan.
Yep.
But at the same time, we talk about, you heard Mac Brown say we got guys playing glorified scrimmages heading into week one, yada, yada, yada. But, I think for a Michigan team, that's something that they needed, especially with all the preseason doubts and Jim Harbaugh being on the hot seat and, going into the year, whatever it is, it feels like forever, and not really ever being able to get over that hump and not having beaten Ohio State. And so I think really for them, it's good momentum early. I think they showed some things. And I think defensively, they have the athletes, they have the guys that can play with anybody. So it'll be cool to see how they progress. But like I said, lesser opponent, kind of what you expected in terms of what their ceiling and capabilities were, and they proved it. You know what I mean? So I think moving forward, that'll be a team to watch to see if they can continue to ride that and continue to crescendo into the meat of that Big Ten East schedule when they do have to play the Penn States and Ohio States and really have an opportunity to make a statement.
I love that word crescendo. They've got a true opportunity here to kind of build into what they want to be mid-season and what they want to be late in the season. And McNamara was very efficient. I don't think he's necessarily a guy that's going to do a ton of, and I've used this phrase a lot, but just kind of how I look at quarterbacks from a defensive standpoint, but like, can the guy create on his own? And I think he's got a little bit of that, but not a lot of that.
Tell you what, that JJ McCarthy kid.
Yeah, he's going to be, that's the create on your own guy. It absolutely was. And he did everything you're not supposed to do. He's, holding on to the ball. He's rolling out. He's throwing it back across his body all the way across the field, late as hell. Yeah. Like everything you're not supposed to do. And
he's got some fart in him, good. Yeah, he's got some fart in him.
This will be interesting.
That's cool for a guy too in Harbaugh who loves. He's had guys, the Lux, but they still play and execute within the system.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah.
If they can do what they're supposed, if they can do. And play to their capability, it will be interesting to see where that goes.
So let's talk about this, because I think one of the things when you're a coach and in that game, you have to play the backups. But one of the things when your backup quarterback is that guy that you do is you create issues because you let fans see him do something like that. And people know that he's probably the superior creator of offense than McNamara, but he's young and you still want to develop him. So you don't want him in the game. And so like every time you give people a taste of that, you're creating that buzz that you want that guy to be in the game. And I'm a fan of McNamara because I think he's going to do the things you need. He's not going to turn the ball over. He's going to make smart decisions, the whole deal. But I'm with you, man. I saw that and I was doing the same thing. I was sitting back like, damn, this kid is going to be like, in a year.
Yeah. And that's a thing. You can't tease the media and you can't tease fans like that because you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. And that's kind of the nature of what college sports have become now from an entertainment business standpoint.
That's it.
But I'm going to say it, pump the brakes. I think McNamara is the guy right now. I think he's the right guy for that team.
Agreed.
In terms of building it and the leadership from a leadership standpoint, from knowing and doing and executing the offense the way it needs to be executed and keeping them in situations to win games. I think JJ is a kid who, as much as he can make that play, I think right now he can also lose you games.
100%.
And where Michigan's at, they can't afford to break that in right now. So just pump the brakes. I know it's going to be hard keeping him on the back burner, but I think moving forward, it's refreshing for for Michigan, because I don't think they've had a guy like that since Harbaugh's been there. So having a guy like that on the back burner, forcing him to sit there and learn it and understand, the whens and when not tos behind closed doors at practice, and then gaining momentum going into next year. I think that's where you see it, and let him make a run for it. But I think it was good for him to get his feet wet and get some action.
Yeah, that's well said from the quarterback. Before we get off of this game, I'll leave on this one. Ronnie Bell went out with an injury. It came out that he is going to miss the season this year. Not only is that a tough blow on the field for the Wolverines, but just sentimentally from a former player, and I know you feel the same way, Hack.
Yeah.
You hate to see something like that. We lost Mo Ibrahim. We lost Ronnie Bell, two of the best offensive players in the conference, two centerpieces of their offenses.
Yep.
And it's what happens in the game of football, but just for the sake of those guys, man, it's tough, and I hate seeing it.
Yeah, it's hoping for speedy recoveries, because both those guys have bright futures. So yeah.
We'll get into a conversation about the week 2 games in a second, but I just wanted to let you guys know about Field of 12 Media, a brand new podcast and digital media network covering college football by the people that know it the best. Brought to you by Shoot Your Shot Productions, the folks behind the Field of 68. The Field of 12 gives you insight into the game we all love by the people who have lived it. Trevor Knight and Bryce Petty covering the Big 12, Max Starks and Clint Sterner own the SEC. We have Harry Douglas, Cody Sensabaugh on the ACC. And of course, we'll be here every week to be your go-to source on the Big 10. Check the links below and find the rest of our shows, The Field of 12, where college football happens. All right. Let's get into a quick little segment on national picture here. This was an interesting weekend. Week one, for the first time in a while, maybe it's because we actually have real football back and everything else, but it felt super exciting. And we got some matchups that I think really just, it opened our eyes. I think this was a very educational weekend in football. You had Clemson and Georgia facing off in talk about a heavyweight, old school dogfight. Not an offensive touchdown scored in that game. You've got Notre Dame playing a Florida State in a very emotional game for the Seminoles, honoring Bobby Bowden. Mackenzie Milton gets in the game. It's just everything kind of ebbing and flowing for them, and just the beautiful things that you love about college football. You had Oklahoma, who got into a little bit of a tussle with the team in Tulsa, who was, it's, what are we looking at? This is a game that we're not supposed to have. You had Alabama beating the piss out of Miami. What'd you take away from the national scene in college football this week?
Yeah, I said this on our After Dark show. Those matchups are good for college football early. I think that was something that was a staple in in college football in years past. Just talking to my dad, even in the late 80s, early 90s, like those matchups were regular. Like you had the Penn State, Notre Dame's, the, powerhouse versus powerhouse in week 1, week 2, week 3. And then they kind of got away from that and they went to how can we service the smaller schools? And it's a way for us to create funding for them. And then we also get, some easy wins on our schedule and get some momentum going forward. And I think now you're starting to see, especially with the pressure for the college football playoff and strength of schedule and all that stuff, you're starting to see these matchups show back up. I think it's good for college football. And I think it's going to be massive for college football moving forward to handle some of these issues and hash out some of these issues, especially across conferences when it comes to playoff positions and all that stuff. So big picture, that's my first thought. But I think the one thing that you pointed out is that this allows you to get a feel for who is for real and who is not. And it brings out the frauds very early, and it shows the guys who are for real. And I think you said it. I mean, I think Georgia and Alabama made a statement when you talk about that top 5, and that could be a massive clash of the Titans in the SEC championship game. And I think we also learned a lot about Notre Dame. I think Clemson, because of the quality of that game, I think offensively they have some things they have to figure out.
Yeah, they got a couple issues on offense, I think.
But I think defensively, you sit there and you being a defensive guy, and me respecting the old school ways of football and the football gods. If you can play defense that well, you're going to be able to play. You're going to be in every game that you step on the field with whomever you step on the field with. So
I think defensively, there's a couple of spots where they lack explosive athletes, but they play extremely well as a unit. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
and I agree. Like Notre Dame was the interesting one for me. I thought Jack Cohn looked really good, but I tweeted this, like people were getting on Marcus Freeman late in the game because of some of the alignments that he was using defensively, 3 defensive linemen down, and Florida State was running the ball down their throat. And I'm like, wait a minute, like Freeman's an Ohio State guy, so of course I'm going to be out there on Twitter caping for Freeman. But I'm like, guys, wait a minute. Like, you can talk bad about the defense, and I'm not saying that he's right because he was wrong. But their offense fell asleep in the third quarter too. 4 minutes left in the third quarter. Everybody on that squad clocked out and gave Florida State a chance to make that game more interesting than it needed to be. The great teams, in my opinion, they don't necessarily do things like that.
They put the gas to the floor and they stomp on it and finish it.
Yeah, they close teams out.
It's funny. I'm texting my dad during that game, and me and my dad always go back and forth, and he always seems to somehow get a little punch in. But right before Notre Dame went on that run where they did stretch it to 18, I told him, I said, I think Notre Dame separates in the first 10 minutes of the third quarter here. And of course they do. And I get so excited. I text my dad. I'm like, I told you, man, I got a crystal ball or something down here. I'm telling you. And he's, yeah. And then, of course, throwing the Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend text right back in my face as soon as it becomes a ball game.
Yep.
So, I think Cone that was eye-opening for me.
Well, it's what he can do when he has upgraded athletes to get the ball to, and an upgraded offensive line, which is wild to say, but Notre Dame, for any school outside of Wisconsin, is known for having first round guys on their offensive line and some explosive running backs. Like the guys around him literally elevated him, and he was in the right situation to do it. You would know this just from quarterbacking, because he's a guy who doesn't make a ton of mistakes. Like, he's going to take a sack instead of throwing a dumb pass. And, like he's going to take the underneath guy when that guy's open instead of trying to force it down the field. And so I think he was in a perfect situation to level up his play.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting because Notre Dame and their schedule moving forward, I think on the back half, both their safeties, I think, are spectacular players.
Yeah, they are. Oh my God.
They're insane.
Yeah.
So I think they have the people in place. I think it'll just be interesting. And the one thing you pointed out was just the environment, the atmosphere, the momentum, that college football magic that you don't really get in the league showed up that night, playing down there, night game, the crowd was in it. Those things are all factors, and those guys haven't seen that, in quite a long time. So, I think Brian Kelly obviously wasn't too pleased, but we'll
move off of those comments there. I don't know if that was necessarily what he needed to say, but
but I think ultimately it's a good win. I think it's a good, tough win for them.
Agreed.
And we'll see what the rest of the season, what the rest of the season has in store.
Yep. And I'll get a correction in here. It was Oklahoma versus Tulane, not Tulsa. So let me get that out. All right. So jumping into segment 3, I've got some previews here. Hack and I'll run through a couple of these games. We got 3 big games in the Big Ten. Those are the 3 games that we're going to run through. First one is the big noon Fox game. That is Ohio State at home versus Oregon. Ohio State favored right now by 14.5 points. Just from my early film study on that game, Oregon is dangerous offensively. They have a ton of formations. They like to run overload formations, so they'll get 3-by-1, 3 receivers to one side, 1 receiver to the other side, with the running back offset to the 3 receiver side, kind of put the defense in the bind a little bit. They run some unbalanced formation, so they're going to make the defense think and get aligned. They're an RPO team, which puts the defense in a bind. You probably explain it a little bit better than I can, but from a defensive standpoint, basically you can't be right because whatever you do, they're going to try to basically do the opposite thing that can hurt you. And the beautiful thing about running RPOs is a little bit different than just a zone read, where you kind of, on the zone read, you got that unblocked player that you're reading on the line of scrimmage. In the RPO game, a lot of times you're reading that second level player, whether that's the linebacker or the safety. And so you can get some of those gap schemes in there where you're pulling guys over the edge. And so Oregon loves this play, and I think it is genius, where they have it's a counter where they're pulling the backside guard and they're pulling that tight end. And they're reading that so they can hit you on the second level if the linebackers are fast flow. And then the other thing they can do off of it is the quarterback can pull it down and run it as well. So it's genius. They've got really 3 options on that play that are phenomenal, but that's what they're going to try to do. And then defensively, they've got guys who can run. And Kayvon Thibodeau is going to be a game time decision, it sounds like, for that game, but they've got Noah Sewell, who I think is a phenomenal player. So it'll be interesting to see what Ohio State can do against these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to touch on your RPO breakdown, which was fantastic, it's the modern day triple option. You from a defensive standpoint, you can handle that just pure zone read with some gap replace. Linebacker and the defensive end switch responsibilities.
That's how we did it.
That presents some issues, but now when you start doing that, then you're just running a slant behind him off the backside with a single receiver, and when you gap replace, to your point, you can't be right. You can't be at 2 places at once. But what I think is going to be interesting is, I think unlike any other matchup, out of conference matchup Ohio State's had to face this year, Joe Moorhead's coming in with experience against Ohio State. He beat them in 16.
When he was at
some
Penn State.
Explosives when he was at Penn State. So he's coming in with some experience, having played Ohio State. Some of the schemes, obviously, those things evolve and change, but he has some experience and some familiarity with them and at that place. So I think that's going to be something to watch. But I think both teams having been in dogfights is going to be interesting. I think Ohio State having a little bit of a longer recovery and preparation week, having played on Thursday night as opposed to Saturday night, that's a factor that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about. Could be good, could be bad. Sometimes those lulls are bad, but I think with Ryan Day and the way he prepares that team, he's going to do everything in his power to make sure that that's not the case. So, I think this is going to be intriguing. I'm not going to sit there and say that Ohio State can't beat them by 14.5. But, I can't even make a call on that. I'm not gonna do that. But I think it could very much so be a great game, as well as it could be a single-handed lopsided win for Ohio State.
Yeah. And these betting lines are courtesy of our friends at BetRivers Sportsbook. But yeah, it's hard for me to call. And again, like I feel like I need to see CJ Stroud a little bit more. Like, are we going to get first half CJ or are we going to get second half CJ? I don't know. I don't know how Ohio State's defense is going to match up against an offense that's going to give them a ton of looks and try to get guys in space and, maybe try to stretch the ball down the field that has an athletic quarterback who's going to pull it and force you to play with all of the guys. That's the thing about one of those offenses. They make you cover the whole field horizontally and vertically, and they also make you defend everybody on them. So that'll be really interesting. The one thing I will give Ohio State the advantage on slight is the shoe, because it's going to be hopefully a rocking atmosphere. Now, last time I checked, there's still 10,000 unsold tickets, which is wild. You would think that the things are already sold, but at the same time, some of them bad boys have been going for a pretty penny. So we'll see what happens, but this will be a good one. To dive into next one, this is where college game day, Jesus Christ, is going. But Iowa is at Iowa State. Big rivalry there. The Cyclones are favored by 5 points, courtesy of our friends at BetRivers. Iowa State looked shaky, to say the least. They were in a tussle that I don't believe they wanted to be in. This is a team that is well respected nationally. This is a coach that is going to be one of the hottest candidates again in this offseason cycle in Matt Campbell. But you've got quarterback play that people really like. You've got a run game that people are into. You've got a defense that folks feel like plays extremely hard for Iowa State. But they were in a dogfight. Flip side of that, Iowa's got the momentum. Like I said, I don't know what they're going to be like offensively, but they've got to be feeling good about themselves. And now we're looking at a top 10 matchup here for this game. Yeah.
I think both teams coming off wins, even though Iowa State was in a little bit of a dogfight. A win's a win's a win, right? For me, just the inconsistencies, the fact that it's at Iowa State, I think that they're able to pull this one off. I'm gonna bet on Matt Campbell. I know that Kirk Ferentz has just beat one of the hottest coaches and biggest momentum teams last week, but I just think the inconsistencies offensively are gonna wear out. And I think the one point that you made, how banking on the defense scoring 14 points for you, is going to be tough. I think Iowa State's going to be able to play more sound, create more plays offensively, and I think they can definitely win by a score or two. So I like Iowa State in this one. But I think it'll be, and I've said it before, I think Iowa's not going to not show up. I mean, they're going to be ready to play. I don't think it's going to be an absolute blowout by any stretch of the imagination, but I think Iowa State can get the momentum going. I do like them in this matchup.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where it's at. I think this will be an eye opener for everybody, regardless of what the outcome
Yeah,
is. If Iowa can win this game, then I'm going to put all of my doubts that I have aside, because that will
100%.
be a huge win. At the same time, if Iowa State gets this one, I think that we can start talking about what this team could be at the end of the year.
Yep.
And even with the inconsistencies that we believe Iowa has, the one thing that we know is it's a rivalry game and it's going to be tough. It's going to be a hard fought game. And so I think this will tell us a lot about either team. We'll finish off with this for the show, but we have Michigan at home in primetime versus Washington. Michigan is a 6.5-point favorite, courtesy of our friends at BetRivers Sportsbook. This is a great opportunity for Michigan to get a big win versus a big brand that has made the playoffs in the past in primetime. Washington, I haven't gotten to their tape yet, so I can't give you a breakdown. But they lost. It's an
very
FCS
underwhelming
team.
performance.
Yeah, I mean, it is bad. Like, this was a game for Michigan, I think, that they really wanted to make their statement. And I think there's still an opportunity just because of the brands, and people are going to be watching because it's a primetime game. But this is the issue for Michigan now as you head into this one, is if you don't win convincingly, you're going to be in a battle with the team that lost to the FCS team, right? Flip that around. If you actually end up losing that game, how do you live it down? Because you lost to the team that lost to an FCS team.
Yeah, the media pressure, the pressure from the fandom up there, and that alumni base, that's going to be tough. I think Michigan needs to win this game convincingly. I also think that they are primed to do so. Mm-hmm. So let's see what happens. I also didn't get a chance to necessarily watch the Washington game, but I think that was one of those ones where you don't necessarily have to turn the TV on. I think you can look at the box score, scan over a few things, and just see, it wasn't the best. It's in the big house, so we'll see. I think I'm primed for Michigan to win this one fairly convincingly, though.
Yeah, I think this will be an interesting one for Michigan on the defensive side of the ball because of that new defense. And I don't think we really got to see a lot out of them because of the opponent they were playing last week. And Aiden Hutchinson had himself a really good game. I thought Dax Hill in the secondary was a guy who just kept jumping off of the screen to me. But I'm not exactly sure that we got a real taste of what they want this defense to be or what it possibly could be. So maybe this will be the game early on in the year, at least, where we get to see what that evolution has been like and what that their mentality really wants to be defensively. So that's what I'll be looking out for.
Growth and momentum on that side of the football.
That's it, buddy. So this was it. This is episode 3 of the JP and Hack Show, part of the Field 12 Media Network, presented by our partners at BetRivers Sportsbook. Again, I am Joshua Perry. That's my guy, Christian Hackenberg. We'll be back with you next week for another breakdown of the previous week's games and a look ahead to what we have on the slate. Really appreciate you guys. Stay tuned.